She got a fine ass body with her head on straight, and she look a little naughty, but that's a-okay. Now I wanna get a drink, just you and me.
Hi everybody, and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about sex, and I'm going to try and make this as PG as possible. No, I'm not. All right. So there's something about a well-written sex scene that touches you in a way nothing else ever will. If you're truly drawn in, you'll feel the tingle of a soft touch on your skin as you're reading. You'll hear your own pulse picking up as the words move your body along with the first deep thrust. Your mind will remember that scent, heat and sweat, musky, like dark chocolate being sipped in front of a blazing fire. Enough whipped cream on top to make it absolutely decadent. Those fingers grazing down the side of your neck awaken every nerve. The sensation travels down and your nipples harden. Your body wants more. You're so close. You hear that voice urging you on. You completely forget these are only words on a page. That doesn't matter because you feel every one. That's what a well-done sex scene should do for you. Along with moving the plot forward, because if the characters are having sex when there's a bomb about to go off at grandma's house, yeah, you might not be as interested in, getting naked with them. So, you want to know how to write a good sex scene? Keep watching. I'll give you some tips as well as some examples from my favorite books, and yes, that means I'm going to be reading some sex scenes. 4 quick, easy ways to improve sex scenes. We'll get into the actual sex some other day. Use all 5 senses, and if possible, use 6. Memories are attached to our senses in the most basic way, but we don't even realize it. When trying to jog memories of an event using taste, temperature, can all bring you back to that very moment so that it's so clear for you. And this is what you want to do for your readers. You want to bring back memories of sensations that they've had like this. Memories of them having a piece of chocolate melting on their tongue and the feeling. And every time that you can do this during an emotional scene, and especially during a sex scene, you're bringing them closer and closer to the characters. You're letting them live the story. If you want readers to be truly engaged, give them the full experience, everything. The sight, smell, taste, feel, sound. All of it is part of the experience that the characters are going through, and the reader should go through that too. And just simple words being used the right way can do that. Be the character. When you're writing, you're not writing you. You're not the person in the story. The character is. So their experience is going to be different than yours. And by letting the reader see the experience as you're learning it, brings everything to a completely different level. If you consider what you've done sexually, it might not seem that interesting. It was probably awesome at the moment, but at the moment, it wasn't just a memory. It was you living that moment. So living it with your characters is the same thing. You're not giving the reader a memory. You're giving them right now. And you're giving it through the characters' eyes and touch and every sensation that they're feeling. How do they feel about the person that they're with? The person that's making them scream names or prayers or gibberish. Gibberish is good. A little tricky to write, but you can do it. Is this the beginning of something? The end? Are they worrying if they left the stove on? Could the world be burning around them and they wouldn't notice? These all matter, and these should all be part of the scene. Even the smallest line, even the shortest little taste of thoughts or what's going on around them helps ground your readers into the story. And you want that. You want that for your readers. You want your readers to be completely immersed in everything that's happening. Now this one, we are shy to talk about, but get yourself in the mood. Seriously, if you're not in the mood and you're forcing yourself to write a sex scene, it's pretty obvious. I mean, I don't want to tell you to masturbate, but I will. I'm not going to say watch porn. Seriously, watch porn. Listen to music. If there's songs that you find really sensual, that will help guide your muse and the characters into you in a way that you can express that sensuality. Find something that makes you think of that moment before you press against that sexy, hot, hard body, and go from there. Timing. Now this is a big one, and I don't think people pay enough attention to it. Sometimes I'll be reading part of a story and it's erotic, and you know, I'm right there with the characters, everything's great, and then they both climax and then they get out of bed and they go make muffins, or they decide to go back to diffusing that bomb that they for some reason decided to suddenly ignore. Yeah, consider your timing for, well, when the actual sex scene is happening, for one. Also, consider the timing of the actual event. There's foreplay, and then there's the sex, and then there's the climax. And a good climax doesn't just, oh, okay, it's done. You know, it's not turning off a blender. It's a climax. Even whether you're a guy, a girl, it doesn't matter. Once you hit that peak, once you've reached that, you know, especially in a story, it should be even more impressive. Sit in it for a bit. Just absorb it a little bit. Let the reader absorb it. Think about how when you're close, when you feel like you're about to have that moment, and then, I don't know, one of your kids knocks on the door and you have to stop and, you know, go clean up dog puke. Yeah, that's kind of spoils things. And when you cut off sex scenes too abruptly, that is exactly what you're doing to your readers. You're knocking on the door and telling them that, you know, the dog puked. Don't do that, because dog puke sucks, and yeah, your readers deserve better. So now I am going to read you 4 excerpts from authors I think do this really, really well. And pay attention, see if you notice them using any of the tips or tricks, and enjoy. We're going to start off with Rock Hard, Sinners on Tour, Book 2 by Olivia Cunning. Sed turned off his phone and shoved it back into his pocket and drew her closer. He kissed her hungrily, his mouth cold from the ice. She clung to his collarbone, her entire body hot from the man. Before the plane even left the ground, he had her dress half off and her senses fully ignited. She checked to make sure the door concealing the cockpit was still closed, and then unfastened his pants. As promised, he was all the way up. "I've never done it on a plane," he whispered in her ear, his eyes glassy with excitement, his face flushed. "Until now." Her fingers trailed lightly down the length of his cock. He sucked in a breath between his teeth. "Tell us to take off our seatbelts," he chanted. "Tell us to take off our seatbelts." Jessica continued to tease him while his hands kneaded one bare breast gently. His fingertips puckered at her nipple. More kneading, more plucking. "Not nearly enough fucking," she groaned. All God said, "Hurry, I need you." She grabbed his cock to show him how much. Just. As the plane gained altitude, her ears popped. The plane dipped and they hit pockets of turbulence. "Hold tight, folks," the pilot said over the intercom. "And please remain seated through the rough patches here." Sed's hands moved to Jessica's other breast. He tossed more ice chips in his mouth and sucked a cold trail along the side of her neck. His hand moved the hem of her dress and slid it upward to reveal her mound. She spread her legs and closed her eyes. She wouldn't be able to handle watching his hand bringing her pleasure. His fingers separated her swollen flesh and slid over her clit. She shuddered violently. Or maybe that was the plane hitting turbulence again. He quickly set her senses spiraling high above the earth, and it had nothing to do with the miracle of flight. "Oh, God," said, "I can't stand it." "We are now at cruising altitude," Jordan said over the intercom. "Feel free to move both the cabin." The rest of her words didn't register. Said released both their seatbelts, flattened Jessica on her back upon the sofa, and plunged into her body with a groan of torment. Jessica cried out as her body strained against his, taking its pleasure instantly in a deep, pulsating orgasm. His hard, quick strokes carried him to join her seconds later. He held her hips while he erupted inside her, his cock buried as deeply as possible, his face contorted in ecstasy. He took a gasping breath and collapsed on top of her, cradling her body in his arms. Yeah, that one's pretty hot. Let's see if we can find something a little hotter. Remember, I warned you, this one is hotter. Literally. This is The Good Boy by J.A. Rock and Lisa Henry. He didn't care if Lane thought he was being overly cautious. He wasn't going to risk undoing all the progress he'd made getting Lane to trust him. He opened his hot sauce and poured a little onto his finger. Lane watched him, eyes wide, chest heaving. He dabbed some sauce onto each nipple. Lane's reaction wasn't immediate. It took a few seconds, and then suddenly he jerked, arcing his back and pulling hard against the restraints. He gritted his teeth and gave a long sigh. "How does it feel?" Derek asked. He could imagine all those tiny surface-level cuts absorbing the burning liquid, the heat spreading, intensifying, while Lane couldn't do anything but lie there and let it. "Burns," Lane said tightly. "I know it does. You're a good boy." Lane shook his head. "I'm not. I like it." Derek was puzzled. "I want it," Lane continued, eyes shut. I'm a whore for it." "Oh, yes," Derek said, catching on. "You are, aren't you? Look how hard you are. You'd let me burn you anywhere, wouldn't you? Your cock, your ass." Lane trembled, a whine rising from deep in his throat. Derek put a little more of the sauce on his finger and spread it into the scratches on Lane's inner thighs. Lane's muscles contracted, and he gasped. "You're gonna burn while I fuck you, Lane." See? Literally. Hotter. This is another one I really enjoyed. You've probably heard me talking about it a lot, and that's for a very good reason. This is Middlemen by Jane Ryland. Rogan is the most scrumptious dessert I've ever devoured. Beer and the sweetness of our meal enhance the flavor of his mouth. Most delicious, though, is his instant and complete surrender of control. While I was a pretty good bottom once upon a time, I had nothing on him. None of the other guys I've slept with since then do either. From the moment I take the reins and capture his lips, he becomes the perfect partner, letting me lead. He doesn't resist when I sip from his parted mouth and tease the very tip of his tongue with mine. Neither does he close his eyes or look away from the honest desire I am telegraphing in my stare. He lets me see, hear, and feel his reactions to my touch. It's so impressive and addicting that I spend forever simply kissing him over and over. The last time I locked lips with a guy like this, I groaned to ward off the memory of Cortez and my infatuation with him. I haven't thought of him once this week. Now is definitely not the time to recall the summer I spent with him in this very same bed. I've wasted enough time mourning as it is. I cope the only way I know how, by replacing pain with pleasure. My fingers spear into Rogan's hair, tugging some as I move him into the optimal position to accept my deepening kisses. He gasps, then melts into my arms. Sure, the man had a long-term partner a few short days ago, but I bet it's been a while since he experienced a connection as electric as this. After years of going without it myself, I plan to rewrite as many awful memories as possible with steamy ones before I let him out of my clutches. If I only get one shot in making an impression, I intend to do it right. I shift my lips so I'm kissing the corner of his mouth, then rubbing our stubbled jaws against one another as my hands glide down the powerful column of his neck, over his prominent collarbones, then onto the front of his shirt. While I'd love to go barbarian and rip it from him, I'm sure it costs more than a month of my utilities. I slip button after button free of the fine fabric and reveal the even finer form beneath. Dear God, he's magnificent as I remembered. Easily one of the most classically attractive men I've ever seen. Never mind, fucked. Yeah, check this one out. And last, but definitely not least, Upending Tad by Cora Knight. I have to say, I actually had stopped finding books really that sexy. I'd enjoy the story, and then I'd get to the sex scene and be like, meh. And then I read this book, and wow. So I found a little part that I think is pretty hot, but to get the full experience is something I highly, highly recommend. Tad, Scott groaned. Just one more time. The ache in his voice tore at Tad's ribs. He scrambled for some rational reason to give in, to give them both what they wanted. Scott's dick joining the party would free up the guy's hand, and honestly, Tad was way past overthinking the consequences. Scott could do him right, and had a track record to prove it, and it wasn't like anyone would know. Tad forced out a hard and resolute breath. Yeah, okay, just one more time. Scott's happy moan more priceless than gold. Tad wanted to steal a peek at his face so bad, see for himself the guy burning with need in a way that was solely for Tad. He was also pretty sure Scott was sporting that smile, the one Tad really fucking liked. The sliding of fabric against skin met his ears. Scott's shorts, he presumed, relinquishing the guy's dick. Tad's towels abruptly disappeared, followed by a rumbling, "Lift your ass." The second he complied, Scott slid said towels beneath Tad to keep him raised. Tad stiffened, suddenly feeling vulnerable, offered, exposed. But then came that gentle, familiar snap, followed by more fragrant oil. It drizzled over his dick and around his nuts, then seeped down to drench his hole. Tad clenched in anticipation, his cock twitching anxiously with need to come. A wrapper ripped open. Tad closed his eyes and tuned in to the soft snick, snick, snick of a condom unrolling. But then came the most erotic noise of all, the slick, seductive sound of Scott looping up his cock. Tad's heart pounded wildly, his breast turning clipped until Scott palmed his ass cheek and held it to the side. Then Tad's breathing just flat out stopped. Two slippery fingertips nudged his hole. "Come on, babe. Invite me in." Jaw ticking, Tad bore down against Scott's touch. Immediately, Scott sank as deep as he could go. Tad moaned and gripped the dude's knees even harder. Scott growled, God, I love how you feel inside. He gave Tad's channel a leisurely stroke, all silky and hot and tight. His fingers fell into slow in and out, swiveling clockwise and then twisting the other way. His other hand recaptured the base of Tad's junk, reminding Tad that technically he wasn't supposed to come. Son of a bitch. So that is all for my examples. But I'm wondering if you noticed how often the authors use taste and smell. How often that if there was a flashback, it would be to ground you in how they were feeling about the person they were with in the moment. These are all little tools that you can use to make your sex scenes stronger and more passionate, more compelling for the reader. I hope these helped, and let me know in the comments what you think, or if there's anything I left out that, anything that doesn't involve taking my clothes off, because I'm not doing that yet. I don't know, keep watching. Anyway, so, oh yeah, like, subscribe, and ring that little bell, and I'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
I don't really wanna think, I just wanna be. She giving third-degree burns, man, I think I need a doctor.